They called it a tragic accident. 2 baby boys gone in the night. My husband's family whispered that I was an unfit mother, that I was losing my mind. But my 4-year-old daughter knew the truth. And at her twin brother's funeral in front of everyone, she exposed a secret so dark it would tear our family apart, and reveal the monster who had been living in our home all along. I am Mabel, 32 years old, standing before 2 tiny white caskets that hold my baby boys. The funeral home is silent except for muffled sobs and whispers. I feel the accusing stares from my husband's family burning into my back. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, moves from person to person, whispering, then looking at me with manufactured pity. Nobody knows the truth until my 4-year-old daughter tugs on the pastor's robe. What she says next changes everything. If you are watching this video, please let me know where you are watching from and hit like and subscribe. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the most. Before I met Noah, I had a promising career in marketing. I was 25, ambitious, and rising quickly at a boutique agency in Chicago. My days were filled with client meetings, brainstorming sessions, and after-work cocktails with colleagues. I had a small apartment downtown, a close circle of friends, and dreams of eventually starting my own agency. Romance wasn't high on my priority list back then. I met Noah at an art exhibition featuring local photographers. He was tall with warm brown eyes and a genuine smile that made me feel instantly comfortable. That night we talked for hours about everything from travel ambitions to childhood memories. Noah was successful too, a software engineer with his own consulting business. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. What I didn't realize then was that Noah was an only child who had been doted on by his mother his entire life. Evelyn had raised him alone after his father died when Noah was just 5 years old. Their bond seemed sweet at first, the way he called her every few days and how she beamed with pride whenever she spoke about him. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months we were talking about marriage. Noah proposed on a weekend trip to Lake Michigan, and I happily accepted. That was when I first noticed something concerning about his relationship with his mother. Before even calling my parents, Noah called Evelyn. He put her on speakerphone and her first response was, "Did you use the ring we picked out?" Not congratulations, not excitement for us, but concern about her input being followed. The wedding planning showed me more red flags that I chose to ignore. Evelyn had opinions about everything from my dress to the flowers to the venue. When I selected a simple, elegant gown, she sent me links to more elaborate ones saying, "Noah deserves to see his bride looking her absolute best." When I chose wildflowers for my bouquet, she pushed for formal roses because they were more appropriate. Noah always mediated with the same refrain. "Mom just wants our day to be perfect." To keep the peace, I compromised on many things. The wedding was larger than I wanted, the venue more formal, the entire affair more about impressing guests than celebrating our love. But I told myself it was worth it to start our marriage without conflict. After the honeymoon, the real issues began. Evelyn visited our new home and immediately started rearranging furniture, claiming she knew how Noah likes things. She criticized my cooking, often bringing over meals because Noah needs proper nutrition for his work. She even commented on my cleaning, running her finger along shelves and sighing when she found dust. Noah never saw the problem. "Mom just wants to help," he would say. Or, "She raised me alone. She just wants to stay involved in my life." I tried to be understanding, to see it from his perspective, but the constant criticism wore me down. 2 years into our marriage, I became pregnant with Lily. I was overjoyed and Noah was ecstatic. Evelyn, however, immediately positioned herself as the expert. "I raised a perfect son," she would say. "I know exactly what to do." During my pregnancy, Evelyn began dropping by unannounced. She would bring prenatal vitamins, books about proper fetal development, and advice about what I should be eating. She questioned my doctor's recommendations and suggested I switch to her friend, who was an obstetrician. When I declined, she told Noah I wasn't taking my pregnancy seriously enough. The day Lily was born was both wonderful and stressful. After 14 hours of labor, I was exhausted but happy to hold my beautiful daughter. Evelyn arrived at the hospital minutes after Noah called her, and she barely acknowledged my achievement. Instead, she took over, instructing the nurses about how the baby should be swaddled and questioning the pediatrician about every detail. She stayed at the hospital constantly, only leaving when visiting hours ended. She dominated the time with Lily, often taking her from my arms saying, "Let me show you how to hold her properly so her neck is supported." When I tried to breastfeed, she hovered, offering unwanted advice and making me feel inadequate. When Lily had trouble latching, Evelyn was quick to suggest formula. Noah saw none of this as problematic. "Mom raised me alone. She knows what she's doing," he would say. "You should be grateful for her help." But it wasn't help. It was control. And it was undermining my confidence as a new mother. When we brought Lily home, Evelyn visited daily. She questioned every decision I made, from the temperature of the nursery to the brand of diapers I used. When Lily cried, Evelyn would swoop in, taking her from me and saying, "She needs her grandmother's touch." As Lily grew, the situation worsened. Evelyn disagreed with my approach to introducing solid foods, my decision to return to work part-time, and even how I dressed my daughter. She bought clothes I had specifically decided against and brought toys that weren't age-appropriate. When I established boundaries, she would tear up and tell Noah I was keeping her from her only grandchild. Noah and I began arguing more frequently. He couldn't understand why I couldn't just get along with his mother. He accused me of being oversensitive and ungrateful. Our once strong partnership began to fracture under the weight of his mother's constant presence and his unwavering loyalty to her. By the time Lily was 3, I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I second-guessed every parenting decision, knowing it would be scrutinized and criticized. Noah and I were more roommates than partners, with Evelyn always between us, the unseen third person in our marriage. When Lily was 3 years old, I discovered I was pregnant again. Morning sickness hit me hard, and I initially thought it was just a virus. After a week of constant nausea, I took a home pregnancy test. The positive result filled me with mixed emotions. I was happy about expanding our family, but worried about how another child would affect the delicate balance in our home. When I told Noah, his first reaction was happiness, quickly followed by concern about finances. "Another child means we will need to budget more carefully," he said immediately, calculating additional expenses in his head. I knew he would be a devoted father, but his practical response lacked the emotional connection I craved. At my first prenatal appointment, the ultrasound revealed a surprise that left me speechless. 2 heartbeats, twins. The technician pointed at the screen, showing me 2 distinct little beings growing inside me. I laughed and cried simultaneously, overwhelmed by the news. Noah seemed stunned when I told him, smiling weakly and saying, "Wow, 2 at once. That will be, efficient." Then he immediately called his mother. Evelyn's reaction was extreme. She showed up at our house within an hour, bursting through the door with bags from baby stores. "Twins!" she exclaimed, hugging Noah first, then giving me a quick, perfunctory embrace. "This is wonderful. Twins run in our family. You know, my great-aunts were twins." As I progressed in my pregnancy, Evelyn inserted herself more aggressively into our lives. She began researching everything about twin pregnancies and bombarded me with information and warnings. "Twin pregnancies are high risk," she would remind me constantly. "You need to be extra careful." When I was 5 months pregnant, Evelyn dropped her bombshell. "I have been thinking," she announced during Sunday dinner at our house. "After the twins are born, I should move in to help. At least for the first few months." My fork froze midway to my mouth. "That is very generous," I said carefully, "but we will manage. I have already arranged for extended maternity leave." Evelyn shook her head dismissively. "You have no idea how difficult twins will be. 1 baby was hard enough for you with Lily. 2 will be impossible, especially with a toddler running around." Noah jumped in before I could respond. "Let's discuss this later," he said. But I could tell from his expression that he thought his mother's suggestion had merit. As my pregnancy progressed, Noah worked increasingly long hours. He claimed it was to save money for the twins, but I suspected he was avoiding the tension at home. Our conversations became brief and functional, centered around schedules and chores rather than connection. One evening, while tucking Lily into bed, she asked a question that broke my heart. "Mommy, why does Grandma say you don't know how to be a good mommy?" I froze, trying to control my expression. Did Grandma say that to you? Lily nodded, her innocent eyes wide. She told Auntie Margaret that you need help because you don't know how to take care of babies properly. I kissed her forehead and assured her that sometimes adults say things they shouldn't, and that I loved her very much. But inside I was seething. Evelyn was not only undermining me to my face but also speaking badly about me to others, including my own child. When I confronted Noah, he defended his mother as usual. She is just concerned, he said. And twins will be challenging. Maybe we should consider her offer to help. 34 weeks I went into premature labor. The contractions started suddenly while I was grocery shopping. By the time Noah met me at the hospital, I was already 5 centimeters dilated. The doctors tried to stop the labor, but the twins were determined to arrive early. After a relatively quick delivery, Ethan and Elijah were born, small but fighters, each weighing just over 4 pounds. They were immediately taken to the NICU, their tiny bodies connected to monitors and tubes. Instead of holding my newborns, I watched them through incubator walls, my heart breaking at their struggle. I had to stay in the hospital for 5 days due to complications, and the twins remained in the NICU for 3 weeks. During this time, Evelyn took charge at home. Without asking, she moved into our guest room to take care of Lily and prepare for the twins. When I was finally discharged, Noah took me home while the twins remained in the hospital. Walking into my house felt like entering a stranger's home. Evelyn had rearranged the furniture, cleaned out my pantry and replaced my food with her preferred brands, and completely redone the nursery I had carefully prepared. I hope you don't mind, she said, not sounding concerned whether I minded or not. I made some improvements. The nursery layout wasn't practical for twins. My carefully chosen woodland theme had been replaced with a nautical design. The comfortable nursing chair I had selected was gone, replaced by a stiff rocker Evelyn preferred. Even the cribs had been rearranged, no longer positioned how I had planned. Lily seemed subdued, clinging to me when I arrived home. Later, she whispered that Grandma had changed her bedtime, her foods, and even packed away some of her favorite toys because they were too babyish. Noah saw nothing wrong with any of this. Mom has been amazing, he said. I don't know how we would have managed without her. When the twins finally came home, they required round-the-clock care. Both had jaundice and needed special feeding schedules. Ethan had slight breathing issues that required monitoring, and Elijah struggled to gain weight. Evelyn immediately established herself as the expert. I can see these boys will need extra attention, she declared. It's a good thing I'm here. When I tried to establish a feeding routine, Evelyn interfered. When I wanted to hold the babies, she often had them first. She criticized my swaddling, my burping technique, even how I changed diapers. One evening, as I was trying to calm a crying Elijah, Evelyn swooped in and took him from my arms. Let me show you how it's done, she said. Some women just don't have the natural touch with babies. I was too exhausted to fight. The twins were not easy babies. They rarely slept at the same time, and when one stopped crying, the other would start. I was healing from the delivery, trying to produce enough milk for 2 babies, and constantly worried about their health. A week after the twins came home, Evelyn made her ultimate power play. I've decided to stay for at least 6 months, she announced at dinner. Clearly, you need the help, and these boys need their grandmother. I looked to Noah, expecting him to at least discuss this with me privately first. Instead, he nodded in agreement. That would be great, Mom. We definitely need the help right now. I felt like I was drowning, losing control of my home, my children, and my marriage. But I was too exhausted and overwhelmed to fight back effectively. The twins demanded every ounce of energy I had, and Evelyn had successfully positioned herself as essential to our family's functioning. As the weeks passed, I noticed concerning patterns with the twins. Despite being preemies who should have been catching up developmentally, they seemed to lag behind. Both boys were unusually lethargic, rarely fully alert even during feedings. They weren't gaining weight as expected, despite consuming what seemed to be adequate amounts of formula and breast milk. When I expressed concern to Noah, he brushed it off. All babies develop differently, he said, and preemies take longer to catch up. But my maternal instinct told me something was wrong. I wanted to take them to the pediatrician, but Evelyn disagreed. "You are being paranoid," she said dismissively. "I raised Noah as a single mother, and he turned out perfectly fine. These boys just need time and consistent care, not doctors poking and prodding them unnecessarily." Noah, as usual, sided with his mother. "Mom has more experience with babies than both of us combined," he reminded me. "If she isn't worried, we probably don't need to be either." But I was worried. I scheduled an appointment with the pediatrician anyway, only to have Evelyn conveniently take the twins for a special grandma outing that morning. When I called her frantic, she claimed she had forgotten about the appointment and was already at the park, though it was a chilly 40 degrees day, hardly suitable for fragile preemies. By this point I was barely sleeping. The twins' erratic schedule, Lily's needs, and my own postpartum recovery left me exhausted. I began experiencing symptoms of postpartum depression, crying frequently and feeling disconnected from my children and husband. "You look terrible," Evelyn commented one morning. "Perhaps you should consider medication. Some women just can't handle motherhood naturally." What hurt most was that Noah seemed to agree with her assessment. "Maybe you should talk to someone," he suggested, not unkindly. "Mom says postpartum depression can be serious." One night, after another day of feeling like a visitor in my own home, I broke down. The twins had been crying for hours, taking turns so that just as one settled, the other would start. I hadn't showered in 3 days, had eaten nothing but crackers, and felt like I was failing at everything. Evelyn found me sobbing in the nursery, attempting to comfort Elijah while Ethan wailed in his crib. Without a word, she took Elijah from my arms. "Go get some sleep," she ordered. "I'll handle the boys tonight." Too exhausted to argue, I surrendered. "Wake me for their 2 a.m. feeding," I said. "Don't worry about it," Evelyn replied. "I have bottles prepared. You need uninterrupted rest." That night I slept for 8 straight hours, the longest stretch since before the twins were born. When I woke with a start at 6 a.m., panicked about missing feedings, I rushed to the nursery. To my shock, both twins were sleeping soundly and had apparently been asleep all night. "How did you get them to sleep through the night?" I asked Evelyn, who was already preparing breakfast for Lily. "Just a grandmother's touch," she said with a self-satisfied smile. "Sometimes babies respond better to experienced hands." That became the new pattern. Evelyn would take overnight duty, and the twins would sleep for remarkably long stretches, sometimes 10 to 12 hours. While initially grateful for the rest, I began to find it strange that 2 premature infants with feeding issues were suddenly sleeping like teenagers. "Is it normal for them to sleep this much?" I asked Noah one morning. "Shouldn't they be waking to eat more frequently?" Noah shrugged. "Mom says they're just good sleepers like I was. We should be thankful, not questioning it." But I couldn't shake my unease, especially when I noticed the twins were still sluggish during their waking hours. They weren't hitting the developmental milestones I read about, rarely smiled, and seemed perpetually drowsy. One afternoon, I overheard Lily talking to her stuffed bear in her room. "Grandma put special medicine in the baby's bottles," she was saying. "She says it helps them be good babies and sleep like angels." My blood ran cold. I knelt beside Lily. "What kind of medicine does Grandma put in their bottles, sweetheart?" Lily looked up, eyes wide. "The white powder from her special bottle. She says it's her secret recipe for making fussy babies behave." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Have you seen her do this many times?" Lily nodded. "Every night when you go to bed. She says not to tell you because you wouldn't understand and would just get upset for no reason." That evening, I searched Evelyn's room while she was bathing the twins. In her bedside drawer, hidden beneath a scarf, I found a prescription bottle without a label. Inside were small white pills, some of which had been crushed into powder. When I confronted Evelyn, she was indignant. "Those are my calcium supplements," she snapped. "For my osteoporosis. I can't believe you would snoop through my personal belongings." "Why are some crushed into powder?" I asked. "Because they're large and difficult to swallow whole," she replied smoothly. "Really, Mabel? Your paranoia is getting out of hand. Perhaps you should talk to someone professional about your trust issues." I showed the bottle to Noah that night. "Something is wrong," I insisted. "The twins sleep too much. They're lethargic. And now I find this. I think your mother is giving them something. Noah examined the bottle and handed it back. These are Mom's supplements. She's taken them for years. His voice grew cold. I think you're experiencing paranoia from your postpartum depression. It might be best if you see a psychiatrist. What about what Lily said about the powder in the bottles? Noah sighed heavily. Lily is 4, Mabel. She makes things up all the time. Last week, she told me there was a unicorn living in her closet. I felt utterly alone, gaslit by both my husband and his mother. With only the word of a 4-year-old to support my growing suspicions, I began to monitor the twins more closely, insisting on preparing their bottles myself and keeping them in my sight as much as possible. Evelyn watched me with narrowed eyes but said nothing. Noah complained that I wasn't allowing his mother to help enough. She's only here to support us, he argued. You're making her feel unwelcome and unappreciated. Something isn't right with the twins, I insisted. They're not developing normally. That's because they were premature, Noah countered. Stop looking for problems where there aren't any. For a few days, I managed to keep Evelyn away from the twins' bottles. During that time, they began to show more alertness, cried more frequently, especially at night, and seemed more like typical babies. This only strengthened my suspicions. Then one night, exhausted from the increased wakings, I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke at dawn, I realized I hadn't heard the twins all night. Panicked, I rushed to the nursery to find Evelyn rocking in the chair between their cribs, a satisfied expression on her face. They slept wonderfully, she said softly. You see, when you stop interfering, everything runs more smoothly. I checked on the twins, finding them deeply asleep, almost unnaturally still, except for their shallow breathing. On the changing table, I noticed an empty bottle with traces of white residue at the bottom. My heart racing, I grabbed the bottle and hid it in my robe pocket. Later, when everyone was busy, I examined it more closely, finding a gritty white substance dried around the nipple and inside the bottle. This wasn't formula residue. This was something else entirely. I researched online, reading about medications that could cause excessive sleepiness in infants. What I found terrified me. Even small doses of certain sleep aids or tranquilizers could be dangerous, even fatal to babies, especially premature ones with underdeveloped systems. I tried once more to talk to Noah to make him see reason. I think your mother is drugging the twins, I said plainly. We need to take them to the doctor immediately for testing. Noah's face hardened. That's enough, Mabel. You need help. Professional help. My mother would never harm her own grandchildren. The fact that you would even suggest such a thing shows how unwell you've become. I was trapped. No one believed me. No one would listen. And my babies were in danger from the very person who was supposed to help protect them. I will never forget that morning. It was a Tuesday, unnaturally quiet in the house. Lily was still asleep, and Noah had left early for a client meeting. Evelyn had taken over the night shift with the twins again, insisting I needed rest because I looked like death warmed over. I woke at 6:30 with a sense of dread I couldn't explain. The house was too silent. No baby cries, no Evelyn shuffling around preparing bottles, just complete stillness. I walked to the nursery, my bare feet soundless on the hardwood floors. The door was ajar, early morning light filtering through the blinds. Both cribs were visible from the doorway, the twins lying motionless in them, too motionless. Something primitive and maternal inside me knew instantly. I rushed to Ethan's crib first, touching his cheek. Cold. Too cold. His lips had a bluish tint, and when I placed my hand on his chest, there was no movement. No, 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 I whispered, lifting him from the crib. His body was limp in my arms. I placed him on the floor and began CPR. The techniques I'd learned in the parenting class now automatic as my mind refused to accept what my hands knew. After 2 rescue breaths and several chest compressions, I ran to Elijah's crib, finding him in the same condition. I screamed then, a primal sound that tore from my throat, waking Lily and bringing Evelyn running from her room. Call 911. I shouted at her, returning to Ethan while keeping an eye on Elijah. The twins aren't breathing. Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale. What did you do? She whispered. That question in that moment burned into my memory forever. Not, "Oh my God," or "Let me help," but "What did you do?" I ignored her, continuing CPR as I yelled again for her to call for help. Finally, she disappeared, returning moments later to say an ambulance was on the way. The next hour was a blur of paramedics, flashing lights, and desperate attempts to revive my sons. They worked on the babies right there in the nursery, equipment and medical terms flying around me as I stood pressed against the wall, Lily clutching my leg, both of us sobbing. I knew they were gone. I think I knew from that first touch, but watching the paramedics confirm it, seeing them exchange those looks of resignation, hearing the words, "I'm sorry. We did everything we could," broke something fundamental inside me. They asked questions, took notes, photographed the nursery. They were professional but distant, treating our home like a potential crime scene, which I suppose it was. "When did you last check on the infants?" an officer asked me. "Around 10 last night," I answered, my voice hollow. But my mother-in-law was on night duty. She's been helping with overnight feedings. Evelyn, who had been sitting silently on the couch, spoke up. "I checked them at 2 a.m. for their feeding. They were fine then, sleeping peacefully." The officer turned to her. "Did you notice anything unusual? Any difficulty breathing? Unusual color? Anything at all?" Evelyn shook her head, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. "They were perfect angels sleeping soundly. I didn't want to disturb them." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. There was a note of satisfaction beneath the grief, a hint of something that made my skin crawl. "They were 3-month-old premature twins," I said to the officer. "They shouldn't have been sleeping soundly through the night without feedings." Evelyn shot me a warning look. "Preemies need more rest to catch up on their development. I was letting them sleep as the doctor recommended." This was a lie. The pediatrician had specifically said the twins needed to be woken for feedings every 3 to 4 hours, even at night. The officer made a note. "We'll need statements from both of you, and we'll be in touch with the medical examiner's findings. For now, this appears to be a case of sudden infant death syndrome, but we need to rule out other possibilities." After the police left, taking my babies with them, Noah finally arrived home. He took one look at our faces and collapsed in the doorway. I had never seen him cry like that. Great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. Evelyn was immediately at his side, cradling his head like he was a child again. "My poor boy," she murmured. "My poor, poor boy. Not our poor boys. Not the twins. Her boy Noah." Over the next few days, as funeral arrangements were made and family was notified, Evelyn began a subtle but persistent campaign. She never directly accused me of anything, but she planted seeds of doubt with carefully chosen words and significant looks. To Noah's cousin, Mabel was so overwhelmed, barely sleeping. I tried to help as much as I could, but she insisted on doing things her way. To my sister-in-law, the poor dear was suffering from severe postpartum depression. Who knows what state of mind she was in during those night feedings? To the pastor, "We're all devastated, but especially Noah. First losing his father and now his sons. Some men just aren't meant to have happiness, I suppose." I was too numb with grief to defend myself at first. The medical examiner had preliminarily listed the cause of death as SIDS for both twins, noting that the risk was higher for premature infants, especially twins. There would be toxicology reports, but those would take weeks. Noah became a ghost in our home. He took leave from work and spent his days staring blankly at the wall or locked in his home office. He barely spoke to me, as if looking at me was too painful a reminder of what we'd lost. Lily became clingy and fearful, having nightmares and asking constantly where her baby brothers had gone. I tried to explain death in terms a 4-year-old could understand. But how do you explain something you yourself cannot comprehend? Evelyn took over funeral arrangements, consulting Noah, but not me. She chose the tiny caskets, the flowers, the program, even the outfits the twins would be buried in. When I tried to participate, to have some say in my own children's final journey, she would pat my hand and say, "Don't worry yourself with these details. You need to focus on healing." The day before the funeral, I overheard Evelyn on the phone with her sister. "Of course Noah is devastated," she was saying, "but perhaps this is for the best in the long run. Those boys were never quite right, and Mabel was in over her head. Noah can start fresh now. maybe with someone more capable of handling motherhood. That was when I knew beyond any doubt. I knew that Evelyn had never wanted the twins to thrive. They were obstacles in her relationship with her son, competition for his attention, and proof of his bond with me. Whether she had deliberately harmed them or simply neglected them when they needed care, she was responsible for their deaths. But I had no proof, just the word of a 4-year-old child, my own maternal instincts, and the growing certainty that Evelyn had been slowly poisoning my babies. By the day of the funeral, most of Noah's family had been influenced by Evelyn's whisper campaign. They offered me cold condolences, their eyes accusing, their embraces brief and formal. I heard the whispers, saw the looks exchanged when I walked into a room. She always seemed overwhelmed. Did you notice how thin the babies were? I heard she wanted to go back to work, leave them with a nanny. Noah deserved better. Noah himself remained distant, going through the motions of grief but never connecting with me in it. We had lost our children, yet we mourned separately, divided by Evelyn's invisible but impenetrable wall. And through it all Lily watched and listened, her young mind processing the adult complexities around her, her innocent eyes seeing truths the grown-ups refused to acknowledge. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and drizzly, fitting weather for the darkest day of my life. I stood in front of my closet, staring blankly at my clothes, unable to decide what to wear to bury my children. Finally, I selected a simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to my grandmother's funeral years earlier. Lily looked tiny and lost in the black velvet dress Evelyn had purchased for her without consulting me. "Do I have to go, Mommy?" she whispered as I brushed her hair. "I don't want to see Ethan and Elijah in boxes." "They won't really be in the boxes, sweetheart," I tried to explain, my voice breaking. "Just their bodies. The part that made them special, their spirits, isn't there anymore." Lily considered this, her forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Is that why Grandma wasn't sad when she found them? Because she knew their spirits were gone already?" I froze, the hairbrush suspended in mid-stroke. "What do you mean, Lily, about Grandma not being sad?" "The morning you were screaming," Lily said, her voice small. "I woke up and saw Grandma going into the baby's room before you. She looked at them in their cribs for a long time, but she didn't pick them up or call for help. She just watched them, then went back to her room to change her clothes. Then you started screaming." A cold wave of horror washed over me. Had Evelyn known the twins were dead before I found them? Had she deliberately left them for me to discover? Before I could ask Lily more, Noah appeared in the doorway, his face haggard. "The car is here," he said flatly. "We need to go." The funeral home was already crowded when we arrived. Evelyn had invited extended family, friends, and even business associates of Noah's, turning what I had wanted to be a small, intimate service into a public spectacle. She greeted guests at the door like a hostess at a dinner party, accepting condolences and directing people to the guest book she had selected. The twins' caskets were at the front of the room, heartbreakingly small, surrounded by elaborate flower arrangements I hadn't chosen. Photos of the babies were displayed on easels, pictures taken by Evelyn, many of which I'd never even seen. I moved through the room like a ghost, accepting hugs and condolences from people I barely knew. Noah stayed close to his mother, the two of them a unit, while I drifted alone, Lily my only anchor. The service was scheduled to begin at 11 o'clock. At 10:55, Evelyn gathered everyone to their seats, placing Noah and me in the front row, with herself on Noah's other side and Lily beside me. The pastor, a kind older man named Brian who had baptized Lily, stood solemnly before the caskets. Just as he was about to begin, Evelyn stood and asked if she could say a few words first. The pastor nodded, stepping aside to give her the floor. Evelyn wore black, but with pearl earrings and a necklace that seemed inappropriately formal. She faced the gathered mourners, her expression one of practiced grief. "We are gathered today to bid farewell to two precious angels taken from us far too soon," she began, her voice steady. "Ethan and Elijah were beautiful boys who brought joy during their brief time with us. Their passing is a tragedy that no family should have to endure." She paused, looking directly at me. "But perhaps there is divine purpose even in such profound loss. Perhaps God in His infinite wisdom called these innocent souls home because He knew what kind of life awaited them. Perhaps he knew what kind of mother they had and chose to spare them future suffering. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Noah stiffened beside me but remained silent. I sat frozen, unable to believe what I was hearing. Had my mother-in-law just suggested, at my children's funeral, that God had killed my babies to save them from me? Evelyn continued, her voice thick with false emotion. My son Noah is a devoted father who would have given these boys everything, but sometimes everything isn't enough when other factors are at play. Murmurs of agreement came from various family members. I saw heads nodding, sympathetic looks directed at Noah and Evelyn, accusing glances thrown my way. I wanted to stand, to scream, to defend myself, but shock and grief had paralyzed me. The room swam before my eyes, and for a moment I thought I might faint. Then I felt movement beside me. Lily had slipped from her chair and was walking to the front of the room. Before I could stop her, she had reached Pastor Brian and was tugging on his robe. "Pastor Brian," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence. "Should I tell everyone what Grandma put in the baby bottles?" The room went completely still. Evelyn, who had been returning to her seat, stopped mid-step, her face draining of color. Pastor Brian, clearly confused, knelt down to Lily's level. "What do you mean, child?" he asked gently. Lily looked back at me, then at her father, then directly at Evelyn. "Grandma put the white powder from her special medicine bottle into the babies' bottles at night. She said it would make them sleep like good babies. She said they would sleep forever if she gave them enough." The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the room moved from Lily to Evelyn, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "The child is confused," Evelyn finally said, her voice higher than normal. "Children make up stories when they don't understand tragedy." But Lily wasn't finished. "I'm not confused," she insisted. "I saw you, Grandma. You made me promise not to tell Mommy. You said the powder was your special recipe for making fussy babies behave. You said it would help them sleep like angels." Noah was staring at his mother now, confusion and the first flickers of suspicion crossing his face. "Mom," he said questioningly. Evelyn laughed, a brittle, false sound. "Noah, darling, surely you don't believe this childish fantasy. Lily is only 4. She doesn't understand what she's saying." "I do understand," Lily said firmly. "You told me it was our secret. You showed me how you mixed the powder in their milk and said if I ever told, no one would believe me because I'm just a little girl." A murmur ran through the gathered mourners. Someone in the back stood up, a man in a suit I hadn't noticed before. "Mrs. Evelyn Richardson," he said formally. "I'm Detective Wilson. I'd like to speak with you outside, please." Evelyn's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. "This is preposterous," she declared. "I'm a grieving grandmother at my grandson's funeral. I will not be subjected to this absurd accusation from a confused child." "Lily isn't confused, Mom," Noah said, his voice barely audible. "She doesn't make up stories like this." He turned to look at me, really look at me for the first time since the twins died. "Did you know about this?" "I suspected," I admitted. "I found crushed pills in her room. The twins were always too drowsy. Lily had mentioned something, but you didn't believe me when I tried to tell you." Evelyn suddenly bolted for the door, surprising everyone with her speed. But the detective was quicker, intercepting her before she could exit. Another plainclothes officer appeared, and together they escorted a struggling Evelyn from the funeral home. The service dissolved into chaos. Some guests left immediately. Others gathered in shocked clusters to discuss what they'd witnessed. Noah sat alone, his head in his hands. While Pastor Brian attempted to restore some semblance of order, I gathered Lily into my arms, holding her tightly. "You were so brave," I whispered into her hair. So brave." "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" she asked, her small voice worried. "Grandma said it was a secret." "No, baby," I assured her. "You did something very right. You told the truth when it was hard, and that's the bravest thing anyone can do." As we sat there in the front row of my son's funeral, surrounded by whispers and stares, I realized that while I had lost my babies, I might finally have regained my voice. The truth was out, terrible as it was, and now justice for Ethan and Elijah might be possible. The twins' funeral was postponed, an unprecedented situation that the funeral director handled with remarkable grace. The tiny caskets were moved to a private room, and Pastor Brian promised to reschedule the service once the immediate crisis had passed. Detective Wilson asked Noah and me to come to the police station to give formal statements. I held Lily's hand tightly as we walked into the sterile building, the fluorescent lights harsh after the dim funeral home. "We'll need to speak with your daughter," the detective said gently. "Given her age, we'll have a child psychologist present, and one of you can stay with her if you'd like." Noah hadn't spoken since we left the funeral home. He sat in the waiting area, staring at the floor, his entire body rigid with tension. "I'll stay with her," I said, not trusting Noah's state of mind. The psychologist, Dr. Reynolds, was a kind woman with a soft voice who quickly established rapport with Lily. "Can you tell me about the baby's bottles?" she asked after some preliminary conversation. Lily looked at me for reassurance. I nodded encouragingly, though my heart was breaking all over again. "Grandma put medicine in them," Lily said simply. "From her special bottle." "How do you know it was medicine?" Dr. Reynolds asked. "Because Grandma said it was. She called it her special sleep medicine. She said the babies were too fussy and needed help to be good." "Did you see her put this medicine in the bottles many times?" Lily nodded vigorously. "Almost every night. After Mommy went to bed, Grandma would take me to the kitchen and let me have cookies if I was quiet. She would get the bottles ready for when the babies woke up." "Did the medicine look like milk? Or was it different?" "It was a white powder," Lily explained. "Grandma would open her special bottle and tap the powder into the milk, then shake it up really good so it disappeared." Dr. Reynolds nodded encouragingly. "You're doing great, Lily. Did Grandma ever say anything else about the medicine, about what it would do?" Lily's face grew serious. "She said it would make the babies sleep like angels. And one night she said if they got enough of her special medicine, they would sleep forever, and then she and Daddy and me could be a family without Mommy being so sad all the time." I gasped, unable to contain my horror. Dr. Reynolds gave me a sympathetic look before turning back to Lily. "Lily, this is very important. Did you ever see Grandma give the babies more medicine than usual?" Lily thought for a moment. "The night before they went to heaven, Grandma put extra in their bottles. I asked why, and she said they had been especially fussy that day and needed extra help to sleep through the night." My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on them. Evelyn had deliberately overdosed my babies. It hadn't been an accident or negligence. It had been intentional. Meanwhile, in another interview room, detectives were questioning Evelyn. Through the investigation details, I would learn later she initially denied everything, claiming Lily was confused or had been coached by me. But when presented with the prospect of a toxicology report that would reveal the truth, her story began to change. "I only gave them a tiny bit of my sleeping medication," she eventually admitted, "just to help them sleep. Mabel was so overwhelmed, and the babies cried constantly. I was trying to help everyone get some rest." But the evidence would tell a different story. A search warrant for our house revealed the unmarked pill bottle in Evelyn's room, which contained prescription-strength sleeping pills. The residue in several baby bottles tested positive for the same medication. Most damning of all, our home security system, which Noah had installed after a break-in at a neighbor's house, had cameras in the common areas of the home, including the kitchen. Detective Wilson showed us the footage. There was Evelyn, night after night, crushing pills into a fine powder and mixing it into the twins' formula. The night before they died, the footage clearly showed her adding significantly more powder than on previous nights. Noah watched the video with a face like stone. When it ended, he walked out of the room without a word, down the hall, and out of the police station. I didn't follow him. I couldn't. I had to be there for Lily and for the memory of my sons. The toxicology reports confirmed what the videos suggested. Both twins had lethal levels of the sleeping medication in their systems. The medical examiner changed the cause of death from SIDS to homicide by poisoning. Evelyn was formally charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, meetings with the district attorney, and preparations for a trial that would expose our family tragedy to the world. Noah returned home that first night, packed a bag and went to stay at a hotel. He couldn't look at me, couldn't speak to me, couldn't bear to be in the house where his sons had died at his mother's hands. A week after the funeral that never happened, Noah finally came to talk. He sat across from me at our kitchen table, looking like he had aged a decade. "I should have believed you," he said simply, his voice raw. "You tried to tell me something was wrong, and I dismissed you. I chose my mother over my wife and children, and now my sons are dead." I had imagined this conversation so many times, had rehearsed angry accusations and bitter recriminations, but faced with Noah's genuine devastation, I found I couldn't summon the rage I'd expected to feel. "We both failed them," I said quietly. "I knew something was wrong. I should have done more, fought harder, taken them to the doctor despite her interference." Noah shook his head. "No. This is on me and on her. You tried to protect them. I was blind. Willfully blind. I've been blind my whole life to what she really is." As the criminal case against Evelyn progressed, more disturbing information came to light. The prosecutor discovered that Evelyn had been treated for various mental health issues throughout her life, including delusional disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. She had been hospitalized twice in her 20s after becoming dangerously obsessed with men who rejected her. Most shocking to Noah was the revelation that his father hadn't died in an accident, as he'd always been told. His father had left them when Noah was 5, unable to cope with Evelyn's increasingly controlling and unstable behavior. She had created the story of his death to explain his absence and ensure Noah never looked for him. "My entire life has been built on her lies," Noah told me, his voice hollow. "Everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my father, all of it was fabricated to keep me dependent on her." Noah and I began seeing a grief counselor together, trying to find a way through our shared trauma. The counselor recommended we also see a marriage therapist, but I was hesitant. The betrayal ran too deep, the damage too severe. Noah had chosen his mother over me at every turn, had dismissed my concerns, had left me to face her psychological warfare alone, and our sons had paid the ultimate price. Noah's family fractured over the case. Some relatives refused to believe Evelyn was guilty, claiming she was being framed, or that she had diminished mental capacity. Others were horrified and reached out to offer support to Noah and me. His Aunt Margaret, Evelyn's sister, revealed that she had always worried about Evelyn's relationship with Noah, calling it unhealthily close. "She couldn't stand when Noah found you," Margaret told me over coffee one day. She smiled at the wedding, but she was seething inside. I heard her say once that no woman would ever be good enough for her son, and she would make sure any who tried would regret it. As the court date approached, Evelyn's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal, arguing that she suffered from mental illness and had not intended to kill the twins. The prosecutor refused, confident in the strength of the evidence. Lily continued to see Dr. Reynolds weekly, working through her trauma and confusion. She had nightmares about her grandmother, often waking, screaming that Evelyn was putting medicine in her juice. I would hold her until she calmed, promising that Grandma could never hurt her again. One night, after putting Lily to bed, I found Noah sitting in the darkened nursery. We had left it untouched since that terrible morning, unable to face dismantling the room that should have held our growing boys. "I can't stay in this marriage," Noah said without turning around. "Not because I don't love you, but because every time I look at you, I'm reminded of how I failed you and our sons. You deserve better than that. Better than me." Part of me wanted to fight for our marriage, to insist we could heal together. But a larger part knew he was right. Our relationship had been fatally wounded long before the twins died, undermined by his mother's manipulation and his own inability to prioritize his wife and children. We might have overcome that with time and therapy, but the weight of our sons' deaths was too heavy a burden for our already fragile bond to bear. 2 weeks before Evelyn's trial was set to begin, Noah filed for divorce. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, a bland official term that couldn't begin to capture the devastation that had torn our family apart. Evelyn's trial began on a crisp autumn day, 18 months after the twins died. I sat in the courtroom, Lily safely at school, watching as the woman who had killed my sons entered in handcuffs, her once immaculate appearance now diminished by prison attire and the absence of her carefully applied makeup. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The security footage, the toxicology reports, Lily's testimony recorded on video to spare her the trauma of facing her grandmother in court, and even Evelyn's own partial confession left little room for doubt. Her defense team attempted to portray her as a loving grandmother whose mental illness had clouded her judgment. They presented expert witnesses who testified about her history of delusional thinking and narcissistic tendencies. They argued that she truly believed she was helping the twins by medicating them, that in her disturbed mind, she was solving a problem rather than creating one. The prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation and escalation. The increasing dosages shown in the video footage, her efforts to hide her actions, and her attempts to blame me all pointed to an awareness of wrongdoing. When it was my turn to take the stand, I faced Evelyn directly for the first time since the funeral. She stared back, her expression unreadable. As I testified about the months leading up to the twins' deaths, the warning signs I had noticed, the concerns I had raised, and the gaslighting I had endured, I saw no remorse in her eyes, only calculation. On the trial's 5th day, I was permitted to read a victim impact statement. I stood before the court, my hands trembling as I unfolded the paper containing words that could never adequately express my loss. Ethan and Elijah were only 3 months old. I began, my voice stronger than I expected. They never had the chance to crawl, to walk, to say their first words. They will never go to school, never fall in love, never know the joy of raising children of their own. Their lives were stolen not by a stranger, but by someone who should have loved and protected them, their own grandmother. I spoke about who the twins had been in their brief lives, their distinct personalities already emerging. Ethan, slightly larger, more vocal, with a gaze that seemed to take in everything. Elijah, quieter, more contemplative, with a smile that would light up at the sound of his sister's voice. The loss of a child is a pain no parent should ever have to endure, I continued. The loss of 2 children at the hands of someone you trusted creates a wound that can never fully heal. Every milestone they should have reached, every birthday they should have celebrated, every achievement they should have accomplished is now a moment of grief instead of joy. I looked directly at Evelyn. I want to hate you for what you did. Part of me does. But mostly I pity you. Your obsession with controlling your son's life cost you everything, and cost my babies their lives. No punishment the court can impose will ever equal the punishment of knowing what you've done. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Evelyn to 20 years to life, noting the particular heinousness of killing infants who depended on her for care. As Evelyn was led from the courtroom, she looked back once, not at me, but at Noah, who sat in the row behind me. I did it for you, she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Everything I've ever done was for you. Noah's face crumpled, and he walked out without responding. Our divorce was finalized 3 months after the trial. As the years passed, Lily and I built a new life, a beautiful life, brick by painful brick. The nonprofit I founded in my sons' names, Ethan and Elijah's voice, flourished beyond my wildest dreams. We helped pass legislation in over a dozen states, ensuring that a child's testimony could never again be so easily dismissed. Lily grew into a remarkable young woman, full of empathy and a fierce sense of justice. She graduated at the top of her class and is now at Georgetown, studying to become the child psychologist she needed all those years ago. As for Noah, after years of intensive therapy, he slowly, cautiously re-entered our lives. He's a different man now, one who understands boundaries and accountability. He is a constant, loving presence in Lily's life, a father she can finally count on. Last week, Lily and I stood on a sun-drenched beach, the same one where Noah proposed to me a lifetime ago. We were there to celebrate what would have been the twins' 18th birthday, releasing 2 white lanterns into the twilight sky. As we watched them float higher and higher, becoming indistinguishable from the stars, I felt a sense of peace I never thought possible. The grief for my boys will never leave, but it no longer defines me. It has become a quiet strength, a guiding light. We survived the storm, and in the aftermath we found not just healing but hope. Our story is a testament to the fact that even after the darkest night, the sun will rise again. Thank you for listening to our journey. If our story has touched you, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories of survival and hope. Your support helps us share messages that matter. Remember to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear that their voice, and their truth, has the power to change everything.